And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. It's great to have Howard Cox join us once again, the person who saves money for the motorist and speaks truth to the government's crazy net zero policies that seem to want to put us all on bikes. Howard, thank you so much for your time again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's great to be back with you, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. Lots to discuss. And it was this one actually, which it was actually from a month ago, but I think it fits into the conversation. And that is the pushback against ULEZ, against LTNs. Let me bring up this post from, I think it was the Telegraph um, last month.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives us a snapshot of maybe where we are, not just pushback in the UK, but France could scrap its version of ULEZ, low emission zones or ultra low emission zones. A group of MPs wants to get rid of low emission zones, calling them punitive and anti-social. Let me bring. Yes, Howard, France could abandon its version of ultra low emission zones as lawmakers debate a bill aimed at simplifying environmental regulations. And this kind of fits into the pushback that we have seen. Maybe do you want to give us a snapshot of what is happening, the pushback against this war on the motorists?
Yeah, actually, they've had the vote in Paris now, and they've won. I think it's 2-1 to dump their version of our ULEZ. So there's some common sense flying through France. It's been led by Marie Le Pen,
Yeah.
and mainly from the far right. I hate using that phrase, far right. It really drives me mad. But anyway, the right side of politics, and also, to be honest, some of the left side of politics have worked with her to actually push this through. Now, I understand the vote went through this week. It's 2-1 now. So that article now has come to fruition. I think they're dumping ULEZ. And the interesting thing about this, Peter, is that a lot of the money to actually fund their version of ULEZ has come from Brussels, from the EU. So they've got to refund that. So let's hope this is the start of a domino effect that hits us in the UK too.
And we've had in the UK, we've had these low traffic neighbourhoods. Some councils in London, I think Haringey, have gone fully communist. I think they're talking about 90% of roads actually restricting cars. God forbid you'd have a car driving on a road that's built for a car. But there have been demonstrations over the years against that. Do you think that there is any pushback on this? Do you think we'll see actually those roads being opened? Because I know sometimes trying to get someone's house, you can spend 5 minutes trying to find which road you have to go through so you won't get fined 80 or £100.
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, I think there is a pushback slowly but surely. It's pretty in a bad way in Oxford, for example. You can't even get into the town. You're giving credits to how much time you can actually use the roads in Oxford. But a lot of things happening in London. I know that in Dulwich, for example, they've actually decided to dump LTNs, which is great news. I think we're gradually getting this war on the motorists. We are beginning to fight back. The worm is turning, and that's what I'm focusing my life on. I'm not doing so much involved on politics. I'm focusing back onto what my core campaigning is, and that's for FairFuelUK, and particularly on three aspects. Obviously, taxation. That's still the core aspect of that, and there's no doubt about with the way this Labour government are running this country. They need as much money as possible, and guess where they get that from? The motorist. So I'm going to be fighting that. There's also the whole aspect of net zero. So I'm taking on Ed Miliband big time in terms of actually stop blaming the driver as the devil incarnate and start actually motivating them. As I say, the third thing is all these other anti-driver policies, and that's parking charges, LTNs, cycle lanes the size of planets, those sorts of things. So from my point of view, I've got a busy time in front of us, but, one of the things I'm putting out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, every single MP, every lord and every major political media correspondent will get a newsletter from me, which is about an 8-page newsletter saying basically the motorists have spoken. We've just finished a poll and analysing a poll of 110,000 drivers. And it's clear, and this is no secret, no one to be surprised to hear, that they're very anti-net zero. Something like three out of four are anti-net zero, and all of them, without fail, even the ones that think net zero is not a bad idea, are saying it's going to be too costly to implement. So it's going to be damaging to the economy. So yeah, going back to your original question, I think there is people will, and I'm going to be trying to get as many people as possible campaigning in London. And I've also got people like the Tommy Robinson team. They're also very much supporting FairFuel UK. So watch this space.
Oh, great to see you speak at that earlier in the year. And those are, I guess, the natural voters on the right who have been abandoned by all parties. I will touch on Tommy in a bit. We'll touch on reform in a bit. But of course, the wonderful news. I'm sure you saw that Harry flew from LA to Shanghai to a conference to talk about greener travel and to talk about climate change. I mean, it's amazing. He was able to do that without any carbon emissions. It's a miracle.
Oh, it's amazing how he does it. He must do it. He must eat a lot of curry and do a fart a lot. I don't know, but anyway, seriously, I was shocked by that. But equally, I've just read today that the filming of Springwatch, for example, with Chris Packham. Did you see that picture?
Yep.
All those trucks wrecking the soil, building trenches and all sorts of things, and wrecking for a Springwatch, which is all about, isn't it, about the environment and saving it and all the other things that go with it. So the hypocrisy right across from royalty to people like the BBC, it just stinks, doesn't it?
It would make you think it's all nonsense, but we'll move on. Here was a post from Rupert Lowe that you had reposted on a completely different topic, and he's written: the Secretary of State, I'm writing to request that your department undertakes a full and transparent review into the continued use of non-stun slaughter in the United Kingdom, with particular regard to halal practices, but given their increasing prevalence in the UK supply chain. So yeah, he has explained the horrendous process of non-stun slaughter, where the animal is not stunned before it is killed. That actually it is killed while very much alive without any sedatives. I said religious freedom must be expected, but should not come at the expense of our national commitment to animal welfare. And I always wonder where the RSPCA was on this, but this is really interesting topic, an important topic, and it seems as though one of the few independent MPs, being independently minded, is actually raising this. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this request to the government for a debate?
Well, I'm working closely with Rupert Lowe. I've got nothing but admiration for him. He's a good friend. When I stood for London Mayor, none of the Reform headquarters people came to me on that day to support me when I voted. I expected a camera crew or even a few iPhones taking pictures of me walking in and out and saying, right, I voted. And the only person that turned up was Rupert Lowe. And ever since that day, I've just got nothing but enormous respect for him. He's also a farmer, that sort of thing. So he recognises about animal husbandry and welfare. And, we have the highest standards in this country. And of our 1.7 million supporters of FairFuel UK, something like 30,000 of them are farmers or people that look after. And I'm regularly getting communications from them say, would I help support them? And I'm doing that in a way regarding, especially the inheritance tax. But let's face it, how we have the highest standards. How can anyone put, sometimes it takes 4 or 5 minutes for an animal to die. I've had dogs all my life and things like that. Anyone hurt my dog, I'd kill them. Yeah, that's official. I do that. And I cannot believe that, how we can get away with it. And the worst thing about this is that the supermarkets, I understand some of it's getting into the food chain, halal meat and halal produce, etc. So there's no labels. We just don't know, do we, where this coming from? And good old Rupert and, and people like Ben Habib as well, all of us, we're fighting big time to stop that, because it's all fits in partly with the fact that this country is no longer British.
It is, and he is asking these questions, which probably wouldn't be allowed to ask if he was still part of Reform. It's interesting seeing that divergence of an independent-minded MP willing to ask questions and Reform being more concerned about what the polling is that day rather than doing the right thing. So, really, really interesting that we'll be watching the support that Rupert has. And we'll see if anyone will support him on that important debate. Um, Something completely different. There were so many as I was going through your feed, Howard, and I love having guests on when actually they are posting a lot. There's a lot of things that are catching their attention and very wide. And despite your primary focus on the motorist, there are a lot of other areas that you were posting about. And here's the Chagos
Yes.
Island deal, and for the US. Don't worry, we supposedly have saved this little island so you can continue to have your airbase. It is costing a little bit. But here we have China praises Starmer's Chagos surrender. And this is from Guido Fawkes, Order. So at the dishonest press conference during which Starmer announced his Chagos sellout, he bizarrely claimed that China, Iran, and Russia opposed his deal, suggesting his decision would be a problem for hostile states. But it now seems as though China have come out and welcomed this deal. And this is, of course, handing over islands that we own and then paying for the right to lease them for 99 years and paying somewhere between 3 and 30 billion. The government doesn't seem to get its figures right, and I wouldn't trust Rachel from accounts to get any figures right. But yeah, this is about national security. And when you look at a map, the islands are in the middle of nowhere, and they provide that security against a increasingly hostile China. But yeah, China welcoming this doesn't really have good omens, does it?
Well, it's astonishing. I mean, and I make the point, it was a dishonest press conference about the Chagos Islands. It just doesn't make sense. We owned it. We had it for, we didn't need to sell it. The Chagosians, or however the people who live there, didn't want it to leave. They wanted to stay British. They've all got British passports, so I understand. And it is in a strategically important place for us, in terms of in terms of actually monitoring things, what's going on in the South Pacific and all the way across to Southeast Asia. We didn't need to. And what are we doing? We're giving away an asset and paying the Mauritians for the privilege. And we all know Mauritius is close to China. We've known that for a long, long time. And I just don't get it. I mean, Maggie Thatcher will be turning her grave. Falklands, we're never going to give Falklands away. She sent an army and a navy out there to actually stop that happening. What do? Starmer says, this is a good deal for us. We got 99 years lease. But we had it anyway. We didn't need to give it away. So, and again, Pinocchio at his conference, he just got lie after lie after lie. I mean, I just don't get it. And really, it's a bit like the Trade Description Act. How does he actually, purport to be the Prime Minister? I thought Prime Ministers are supposed to be honest with the public, and he's not. He's lying through his teeth again.
But of course, these negotiations were started by Cleverly in the Conservatives. So it is a plague on both houses, really.
You're absolutely right. The Uni Party, combined the two of them, you're absolutely right. I mean, they can't, it's good to see people like Robert Jenrick showing some signs of a bit moving to a traditional Tory thing, but they've got a long way to go. And they're dead and buried at the moment, the Tories. I had meetings with Priti Patel last week, and bless her, and she's very supportive of FairFuelUK, and we'll be working closely with her on that thing. And she's on the front bench in terms of this, and she said, to me quite categorically, won't swear on here, Peter, but I've got nothing but respect for a lot of people, ups and downs with Priti, but she's a true Tory, and she's basically saying we got to get our act together. People don't like us anymore, and we got to earn that trust back because we buggered the whole thing up. And she told me that, and she won't mind me saying that. And to cut a long story short, I can't see the Tories getting back for generation that may not even exist. And and Nigel Farage doesn't have to do anything. He just stands there, and Labour is shooting themselves in the foot, and they promote him at conferences. All these sorts of things are happening, Peter. And so, we're still 4 years away from election. Perhaps I think it's more likely to be a year or two with the way things are going. There you go.
I know Reform are doing well, not because they've got great policies, and we'll touch on some of those, but because the dire situation of the opposition, as I said, the Uni Party. But we'll touch on that a bit. You mentioned about Tommy, and Ben Habib put this out, clips of from Tommy, starting with Michelle Dubry, who's always actually spoken truth on this issue and doesn't really seem concerned of actually getting cancelled on GB News. But here's the clip that Ben put up, and obviously Tommy just been released from prison days ago.
I'll tell you now another story that's got everyone talking. Tommy Robinson, Stephen Yaxley Lennon, he was released early today from prison. Of course, you know this story by now. Lots of you get in touch frequently about it. Let's look at a clip of something that he had to say earlier.
In a country that doesn't believe in free speech, being a citizen journalist, this place is an occupational hazard. It's ridiculous.
I was like Robinson Crusoe, don't I? Ben Habib, I mean, I've got to say, he went on to say a lot of other stuff he thinks is an enemy of the state. I think if people actually thought they were going to silence him by locking him up, I think they'll be surprised. I don't think they're going to. Your thoughts?
Well, the Tommy Robinson phenomena, I don't think should be looked at through the persona of Tommy Robinson. What we should be looking at is the what he's been subjected to and what he's had to put up with in order to have his free speech. And so it's not about Tommy Robinson, it's about the fact that he was incarcerated for showing this film. And without a doubt, in my mind, he was a political prisoner. It was a civil case. Absolutely, you're shaking your head, Matthew.
I am.
But it was a civil case for which, in which an injunction was placed on him from showing this film about this Libyan boy. He breached the injunction, Syrian boy, and he breached that injunction. And the right course of action should have been a rap on the knuckles, a fine, or whatever. It should have stayed in the civil domain. But Lord Hermer, who's a terrorist-supporting, illegal migrant
He would
supporting,
dispute that.
he is a terrorist supporting.
He's not a terrorist supporter.
He is. He backed Jerry Adams. He backs Jerry Adams, and he's trying to change laws in this country so Jerry Adams can
he's not here to defend himself, is he?
Okay, but he is a horrible man. He's a political appointment. He's the Attorney General, and he elevated the case against Tommy Robinson from being civil effectively to being criminal and directed the courts to incarcerate.
That's Ben. And let me just share this one screen to put them together. This was Katie Hopkins' post. Jill, looks good on you, Stephen. You have the heart of a bloody lion, and those who cage you are right to feel the fear. Even solidarity, you're never alone. We are many, and we are stronger together. The Tommy Robinson phenomenon, which Ben talked about. I kind of been on that journey for 16 years, for better or for worse, and it is a roller coaster. But what your thoughts? You put yourself forward. You spoke in January at that conference, which is always a risk because the media portray him one way. He's been 200 days solitary confinement. Yeah, give us your assessment of kind of where Tommy has been and now he's been released.
Well, it's great to see that he's got his spark. I visited him in February. I spent 2 hours with him and spoke with him because, as you know, I fell out with the Reform Party because I supported Tommy Robinson. It's not because I wasn't supporting Reform policies, even though they're a bit, pie in the sky still at the moment in time. But fundamentally, I was backing Reform. I was very close to Richard Tice. I've been 10 years with as a friend of Nigel Farage, and he's a big fan of FairFuelUK. And, in their contract with the people, their quotes manifesto, election manifesto, you're seeing into the transport area. I helped write a lot of that. And one of the points is the 20p cut in fuel duty, and they're maintaining that and all that sort of thing. So in terms of hard-nosed policies, and Reform are doing well out of all those sorts of things. But I got that, I think I've told you before, Peter, I was told just before I left them, Richard Tice sent me a WhatsApp message which simply said, if you continue to support Tommy Robinson, you will be expelled from the party. So I beat them to it and said, I'm leaving. You don't do that. And this is the point. And it was good to hear Ben saying it's nothing to do with Tommy Robinson. It's about free speech. And this is a man who simply was highlighting the fact our children are not safe in certain parts of the country. They're being raped systematically by Pakistan gangs. So please, let's not get over the top. He is a bit of an enigma. We know that. We know what he's like. But I met him face to face, and he inspired me. And he was very, very down then. He wasn't very well. He wasn't eating some of the food there because most of the chefs there were Muslim chefs. So there's a lot of things going on around that man. And you saw Katie Hopkins, and she's dead right to say, I think she said, you were never alone. We are many, and we are stronger together. And and Katie, you don't cross Katie, and she's fantastic. But anyway, as far as I'm hoping to meet Tommy soon to talk about it, and I think there's a big free speech thing going on September, which I should imagine he'll be centre of attraction, very much there. So yeah, Ben, myself, and Rupert are both actually. We're not incredible Tommy Robinson fans, but we are Tommy Robinson sympathisers, and that's the most important thing. You do not put someone for a civil offence into solitary, into prison for that sort of thing. And long may he continue to try and highlight these problems of these child rape gangs.
No, absolutely, and I must have seen him just maybe a week or so, either before or after you went to see him with Gerard, and
Right.
most people would be crushed. And I went to see him in Belmarsh, goodness, but most people wouldn't have survived that, being locked away 200 days. But he is made of sterner stuff, and that's what the public see. They see that tenacity, they see that boldness, that courage, and that's what we want. And you look at political leaders, and that doesn't exist anymore. So people look at Tommy, and that's a reason why they gravitate to him.
Well, there's 200 million people seen that film. It's now been taken down. That's part of the, for him coming out early, that had to be taken down, and he's done that sort of thing. But I was delighted with his attitude when he came out. Yes, he did look like Robinson Crusoe, but within 2 hours he had it all shaved off, and he was back to clean shaven Tommy or Stephen. And I spoke to Liam Tufts and people like that, very close to them, and he's in fighting form. You won't be able to stop the man, and I've got nothing but admiration, and he certainly inspires me.
No, absolutely, and I encourage everyone, if you haven't seen the interview that Ezra Levant did, and I saw Ezra last week whenever it was announced Tommy was being released, and had a good catch up with him. But Ezra did a sit down with Tommy, really important to watch. And yes, September, mid-September, that will be a phenomenal event with so many people. So make sure and be part of that. And I know Tommy's put information out on his X handle, and more will be coming. So keep an eye on that. Okay, for our US viewers, for the War and Posse, let's jump over stateside, and this announcement from RFK, or Bobby, or Secretary Kennedy, as his handle is. Here's just a short clip of discussing removing some of the COVID jabs from children, from pregnant women. Here's the 1 minute clip of this announcement.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary, and I'm here today with NIH Director Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary. I couldn't be more pleased to announce that as of today, the COVID vaccine for healthy children and healthy pregnant women has been removed from the CDC recommended immunization schedule. Last year, the Biden administration urged healthy children to get yet another COVID shot despite the lack of any clinical data to support the repeat booster strategy in children.
That ends today. It's common sense and it's good science.
There's no evidence healthy kids need it today, and most countries have stopped recommending it for children.
We're now one step closer to realizing President Trump's promise to make America healthy again.
And it's because I've seen some people say, "Oh, this is disgrace. You need to remove it immediately." But in politics, everything is a step by step, and they're making big changes. But yeah, the whole issue of drugs being given to people who are healthy, it's the opposite of what we've always learned, I think, from health. But yeah, this seems a very good positive statement.
Well, you as you may know, I'm 70 years of age, and unfortunately, I did take 3 of the vaccines because I was one in the susceptible group, the vulnerable group, and I did take it. I actually think I'm suffering a bit. I get a few problems these days with a thing called brain fog and things like that, which seem to have come up after taking the COVID. I'm delighted to see this, and I'm quite close to people like Andrew Bridgen, who's actually, he's a champion. It's a bit like Tommy Robinson to me. He's been fighting like mad on this, and he was sent to Coventry by most of the Parliament. He was thrown out of the party, You know, and I'm glad to say, and I'm pleased to say that I'm working with him on this one and other things as well. And you know, this whole thing about COVID, I'm actually a pharmacologist by training, and I worked in the pharmaceutical industry from the age of 20 to about 30 for 10 years. I worked in the laboratory, you know, and our main aim for the pharmaceutical company was actually just cure the symptoms. Don't worry about the underlying disease. And this is the point, because obviously there's no profit in, you know, curing a disease for pharmaceutical companies. So I become a bit of a cynic. I was very pro pharmaceuticals at that time. I, you know, did a part-time degree with them. I was paid, you know, to do it, which is all those sorts of things. But COVID, you know, we've learned our lessons, and I'm now seeing that we've signed up to the WHO point about, you know, that we're all going to lock down. And guess who's first in the queue to sign up? Starmer. You know, they're just not thinking. They don't think at all objectively. And yet again, we're not asked. We're just told this is what's going to happen. So, yeah, I'm delighted. And I'm a big fan of Kennedy, you know, and I mean, considering his, you know, his parentage and all his family going back a long, long way. You know, as I say, I was around when the, you know, his great uncle, I can't remember what it is now, was assassinated. But he's got some principles, even though I think he's a bit of a Democrat. You know, he's now, you know, fully in Trump's camp. He's talking sense, and I'm over the moon that actually that, you know, kids will not get it, and no all pregnant women. So quite right.
You know, it's really, really exciting news. And I think a lot of us were thinking, when is this going to come? When is it going to come? And things take time. So it's wonderful to see Maha and Micah working closely together. And someone on Trump's administration who maybe not necessarily Trump, and yet sees the benefit of working together. So really, really exciting. Here's one of the Americans coming to help us. And this is on free speech. This is Secretary of State Rubio targets foreign nationals who he alleges police American social media posts. He called out Europe over speech crackdown and pressures on US tech platforms. And this is on Wednesday announced a new visa restriction policy targeting foreign officials who he says are complicit in censoring what Americans say online. And this is key because after the summer, demonstrations, riots, overflow frustration against mass immigration. Of course, we had senior police officers saying they would go after Americans who were posting this. We will come and find you. So I don't know whether this means Keir Starmer is no longer able to travel to the US. I'm kind of hoping. But it's this bravado. It's this, we're going to do what we said we would do. And speaking up for free speech everywhere. And if only the British government protected Brits abroad, may be different. But yeah, what are your thoughts? Free speech now being protected and America taking that lead.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, there's thank heavens for, you know, the biggest nation in the world, the most, you know, successful economically, the nation in the world is still embedded with free speech. I'm not sure if Joe Biden would have been, you know, if he stayed there, we'd be, you know, celebrating this, and long may it continue. Elon Musk, I know he's gone now a little bit. He's left the administration with his Doge stuff and that, but he was one of the first to call out over here. You know, he stood up for Rupert, he stood up for Tommy, and it's stood up for Lucy Connolly, and etc. I know we'll probably talk about that in a minute, but the thing is, you know, it's absolutely right. Free speech, you know, provided you're not leading, you know, into a Nazi state. And we talked about the Attorney General early on. He's now coming out saying that we're all Nazis if on the far right. You know, I just find it astonishing what's happening. But why isn't he being arrested and put in prison? You know, this is the sort of thing. He's actually inciting, you know, anger. You know, we go back to people like Peter Lynch, who committed suicide. All he did was shout at the police and moan about it. Yes, he's very strong, and all I'm saying is that, as far as I'm concerned, if you look at my Twitter feed since 2009, I should be probably doing a life sentence.
Well, it could come. Don't worry, Howard. Don't wish for that. You mentioned Lucy Connolly. Let's bring up this because it fits in perfectly, and she is one of the key people that are showing this collapse, along with people who go and pray outside abortion clinics and get arrested for prayer. But here's Conor Tomlinson saying Lucy Connley has been refused right of temporary leave to visit her husband and daughter because the prison authorities decreed she expressed extreme views. This has now been changed to strong opinions. The woman has been held in a cell not just for a deleted tweet, but for refusal to submit to the worship of diversity as our strength since. She's serving 31 months, and they refused to let her to be released on compassionate grounds to see family. I didn't know that strong opinions were a deciding factor to someone being released or not. So, I mean, there's so many questions around it. Who makes those decisions? I'd love to see where this is written down. Is there a legal document that says anyone with strong opinions must stay in prison until those opinions are beaten out of them? But Lucy Connley, horrendous case.
Absolutely right. It's interesting you say this from a point of view, 31 months and she's not allowed to see a child whatsoever. I mean, I looked at that and I've reread her tweet several times. It was a bit of a crass statement. She was a silly thing to say, but she did actually continue that statement about burn down whatever the mosques and things. Well, the next line was "for all I care." Mm-hmm. It wasn't as though go and do it. It's I say things like that. Oh, they can all drown in bitumen if I was for all I care. It's just a statement. It's not something. It doesn't warrant any imprisonment. Maybe she should have done some community service, all that sort of thing. But when you see people like Mike Amesbury, who punches his, the MP that, punched one of his constituents in the middle of the night, he gets a suspended sentence. He's not in jail, and he punched that person's lights out. It was unbelievable bad. And if you look at some of the history of people like David Lammy, Rayner, and all the things they've said about people like Trump and others, and everything like that, and what they've said about Farage, and even I've been had things said about me, which I know I'm not that famous, but from a point of view, some of the things I've had death threats, all those sorts of things. To cut a long story short, Lucy Connley should be out at home with her family now, and she should issue a little statement. "I was a silly thing I did there, and I'm happy to do 100 hours community service." And that's a big deterrent. At the moment now, we haven't got a clue at the moment what is free speech and what you can. And you quite rightly said, strong opinions? What's wrong with that?
Well, it's now illegal. We'll all be locked up for strong opinions. Thank God that Keir Starmer doesn't have an opinion in his body, that he will go with whatever. But I've been intrigued in, and we'll move on to reform and touch some of their policies. But the whole reform, because I expected you'd have the Conservatives, so-called Conservatives, would be standing up for these hundreds and hundreds of people, up to 1,000 people arrested soon after, many languishing in jail for years for putting posts up. I thought there'd be big concern of that, and I thought also reform would be extremely vocal, and yet both sides, supposedly both on the right, champions of free speech, both of those groupings, Conservatives and Reform, have been fairly silent on this. And you kind of begin to worry, where is the voice coming from in Parliament to stand up for law-abiding citizens who maybe tweet something that might be spicy and end up 2.5 years in jail?
Well, watch this space with GB Pat and Rupert, Ben, my involvement, people like Andrew Bridgen, etc. Quietly but surely, it's no point in putting it out there yet. We're getting out all our ducks in a row. We will be standing for that, and we hope to. I don't think we can unite all of the right, but we will do our best to bring common sense and putting the right policies together. I'm very disappointed with reform. I stood up and spent 2 days in court for the Tooting 4 or 5, if you remember them. They simply, all they did, their 60th protest was in Tooting, and they were arrested because it happened to be Sadiq Khan's home patch, and etc. It's been dropped. The appeals dropped. They've got their money back, which is fantastic. All they did was shouting, we want to get rid of ULEZ and we want to get rid of Sadiq Khan. Sorry, welcome to politics. They didn't do any. They weren't involved with violence. They weren't shouting and screaming nasty things to the man. But he took a court case out to them that he was personally, and his family were personally affected by. I can't remember. It involved harassment. But in no way I mean, that man's been harassing London for years. And so from my point of view, good to see that finally, the appeal was going to be next week, but the CPS decided to drop it because they knew they'd lose it. I witnessed that court case for 2 days. I sat in there and watched 7 police people who there give evidence, and all 7 police gave different accounts for what happened. And and yet the judge, I'm sorry to say it, the judge himself apparently is quite close to Sadiq Khan in terms of fundraising events he's been to. It just makes you wonder. It stinks, and I'll probably be arrested for saying this. But the thing is, what we're looking, in terms of reform, they should be standing up for the people in the street. They're purporting to be doing that, but when it comes to the crunch, they seem to be absent.
Well, let's touch. There have been a couple of things on reform. I'll throw these two together. There is the Messiah himself. How will Reform UK pay for its pledges and policies? Nigel Farage, I think this was in The Guardian, Nigel Farage has promised up to 80 billion of tax cuts and spending rises, but can he really pay for them by axing net zero and diversity and inclusion initiatives? So you've got suddenly Reform don't seem to be the party of smaller government and lower taxes. It seems to be actually ramping up spending, because if you do huge tax cuts, obviously, and spending rises, you need to fill that in. So you've got that on one side, and then let me bring up. It was from where was it from? Let me see if I can pull up the second one, which is here. Huffington Post. Now, Huffington Post, no friends of any of us. But this Nigel Farage's voters' last choice to be Prime Minister. Poll says he's behind Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, and even Kemi Badenoch. Compared to Farage, the incumbent Labour PM has supported 44% of people, while Nigel has 29%. Now, this could be sour grapes that Reform are polling well. But yeah, these two together, high spending seemingly by Reform, and that hole has to be filled. But then Nigel may not be as popular as he thinks. So what are your thoughts on these?
Well, that's it. He is a Marmite character. He's worshipped by so many people in the party, and good people who I counted on being friends. I mean, they've all stabbed me in the back since. This is the way they operate. But there's some really good people in Reform, super people, and I still count them as good people. But they worship the ground he walks, as you called him, the Messiah. I remember when he did announce back last year when that he was standing for election, and then just walked in and said, right, I'm taking over leadership. The rest of you lot are going, this is what you're going to do. Someone wrote to me who's very close to me in London, helping with London, and he simply said this line: he now walks among us.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. And that's I mean, you can see the trail of disaster right the way days from UKIP days all the way through Brexit and then to Reform. All those sorts of things. He takes it to a certain stage and leaves. Now, when I was standing as London Mayor, he wasn't leader of the party, and I didn't get the support. I'm not suggesting I would have won the mayor as mayor, even with him there, but we would have secured probably 4 or 5 more people in the assembly. In the end, we only got 1, and that's the sort of thing which I was very angry because I didn't get the support I should have done, and I was a guinea pig, and they used me because of my FairFuelUK. And because it's related to ULEZ, and that was the biggest issue regarding the London mayorship. But yeah, and in terms of them spending, I mean, the actual contract with the people, if you look at it, there's one thing that people don't talk about so much, and I have to give Richard Tice credit for this, is this quantitative easing. We pay a lot of interest, what people don't know, to the tune of about 30 or 40 billion pounds a year, which goes to the Bank of England. And and we're paying for that. So if you add up the certain things like net zero, DEI, and getting rid of about 5% of the blob, the civil service, and getting rid of quangos and this quantitative easing, there is a huge amount of money that can be put back into the economy to spend. And we've got to put, winter fuel allowance, that's got to come back. That was a silly thing to do. I don't understand how Labour did that. We don't need to change the 2-cap thing for child benefit. I don't agree with that. And nor does Rupert. But suddenly, Nigel does. There's lots of things that Nigel are doing now, to me, are very liberal, Lib Dem almost, the sort of thing. But he will do well because, as we said earlier, Labour and the Tories are not worth anything, are they?
Really, we want politicians like Trump who have conviction, who will drive the agenda and lead at the front and present an argument for a good idea, rather than look at the latest polling or focus group, which I think Nigel's fallen into.
Yeah.
As he sees that prize, I guess, of number 10, and he seems to be wanting to do anything. I'll just show this, and then we'll just end up with a little clip. But we'll do this. You had posted this, and again, it fits into your work. And this is Tesla tax set to be scrapped. And you said, I've said on behalf of FairFuelUK that the only way EVs can succeed, electric vehicles, is to legally but unfairly knock out diesel petrol cars via the draconian 2030 ban, keep tax subsidies, and remove any vehicle tax. But we see this time and time again, the tax system being used not to raise money, but to actually change opinion or change public actions. And of course, the 5,000 or 10,000, whatever it was, you got off an EV car. I guess that has to come out taxes. So I guess me with my 8-year-old diesel car have to pay extra in tax so someone can buy their 70,000 Tesla and get 5,000 off. So yeah, fill us in on this, and how will this affect maybe the uptake, and maybe how will this affect the supposed ban on internal combustion engines?
Well, I said it when in the journey to actually this so-called 2030 ban, the only way people would actually buy an electric vehicle or rent or lease, and most of them are leased at the moment through company car schemes. Most of the EVs are. It's very few. It's something like, I think 15-16% are actually purchased by private householders or private buyers, etc. The rest are actually through business schemes. Anything. The only way for EVs to succeed, and let's be clear, EVs, it's great technology. I've driven them; they're fantastic things. I drive a hybrid. All that sort of thing. But the thing that is the only way they're going to succeed is for tax incentives, tax subsidies, and the fact that they don't have to pay tax, they don't have to pay congestion charge, or they get 90% in London, they get off. That's going to change, as you probably see that Sadiq Khan is going to increase in congestion charge by 20% when we've got inflation at 3.5%. The whole thing is a mess. The thing is, nothing's in place. You did not need to. I mean, Boris Johnson's got a lot to be blamed for this, because he actually brought in this ban on new diesel and petrol car sales for 2040. Then he woke up one morning, let's make it 2035. And I'll tell you what do you think, Carrie? Let's go for 2030. And I managed to convince, I spent a lot of money on an objective economic campaign to say that what would the 2030 ban do for the economy? Well, let me tell you what it would do is that the benefits, the costs are 5 times more than the benefits. 5 times more than the benefits. And I had to give Sunak a bit of credit there. I presented that to him, and he moved it back to 2035. But now Starmer's in; it's back to 2030. What does that do to the manufacturing industry? How can they plan? Their production lines, and we're seeing a lot of them saying, "Stuff it, we're not going to be in this country." Nissan are coming over to do more EVs, I see, but fundamentally, it's a mess, and we haven't got the grid. And the irony is that when we do get anything like increasing the number of charging points, the electricity supplied is produced by fossil fuels. The whole thing is completely stupid. And I repeat what I said earlier: we're never asked. Public consultations, this sort of thing. There are 3 or 4 big issues in this country, one of which is net zero, which should go to a referendum. And we should also have a true cost benefit analysis of what this all means. And because if we hadn't had this 2030, this terrible doctrine, this terrible ban, the diesel and petrol, we're currently on Euro 6 standards of emissions. I know for a fact Euro 7 and Euro 8 have been worked on, and in the last 15 years, emissions have gone down by 60%. And had fossil fuels been allowed to move forward, we'd probably be down to about 80%. We didn't need to do this, and people could still be using their cars. The nation's crippled under a net zero approach, and the person that's always takes it in the wallet is, of course, car drivers.
And I guess if local councils need to buy new fleets of vans and cars to be compliant in 4.5 years, if you think your council tax hasn't gone up to now enough, it
Yes.
will be going up.
Yes.
Crazy. No, it's a key thing. Let me just play this video just to finish with. It's to do with East London and the rollout of, well, Must basically having the call to prayer. And I don't know whether this is something we didn't sign up to. And it's not, I mean, it's one thing you move in and have maybe a bad neighborhood, or you move in and find a construction project next door, but you move in and have a siren blaring at you at 5 a.m. 5 times a day. It's not really what you want. But here's a clip from East London. You get the idea. I don't really want to play the whole thing, but 5 a.m., it's not really what you want to be. I mean, I sometimes woken up with the bin lorry outside at 6 a.m. That's once a week. If it was a bin lorry every morning at 5 o'clock, that would piss me off. And yet this is what poor people in East London and many cities in the UK this has been imposed on individuals without any questions asked of this. Is this something you want?
Well, I absolutely, and we mustn't forget the person who silently prayed outside of an abortion clinic, just stood there outside of it. With, obviously, whether you're pro-life or or whatever you are in that situation, that person was arrested. And we see it time and time again that anyone that stands up on a soapbox in, say, in Leicester Square to talk about Jesus and Christianity, or Hyde Park Corner around that way, Speaker's Corner, you get that sort of, they're arrested. But when it comes to actually is anything Islamic or the Muslim faith, they seem to get away with whatever they want to do, and we're just sick to death of it. And I'm all for various numbers of religion in this country, but I'm afraid we are a Christian nation, and that if you imagine going over to somewhere like Syria or Iraq, Iran, and standing on a soapbox and calling for Jesus, I don't think you'd be out in 30 years, would you? And you'd probably have both your hands chopped off.
Yeah, you may not make it out alive. This is where multiculturalism has completely destroyed this country. We no longer know what we believe and have accepted everything else into that void. So yeah, that's a video of something coming to you very soon, I am sure, unless we do something about it. Howard, always appreciate you coming along. I know you've got so much happening, standing up for the motorists with FairFuelUK.com. So thank you for giving us your time today.
Yes, it's a pleasure. And please, people watching this, please sign up to Fairfield UK. It's totally free. We're not asking any money. You can buy some stickers and things like that. But the more we have, the more we can convince people in Parliament to actually stop all these anti-driver policies. Because in the budget that's coming up in autumn, we'll be putting up fuel duty. I promise you that. Especially as we're now aligned with the EU with their carbon taxation.
No, definitely sign up. I've done it. Make sure the viewers and listeners do sign up. Go to FairFuelUK.com and put your voice down to add to the many, many that are part of that. And the more of us that do that, the more chance of success we will have, and the more power you'll give to Howard to actually speak up. So certainly I would recommend that as well, Howard. But thanks so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Peter. Thank you.